having a virtual cup of tea with historical fiction author Kathryn Gauci. We'll be talking about World War II research and how we incorporate it in our writing. She and I connected immediately because we have a common interest in World War II history and incorporating it into works of fiction. And Kathryn, like me, you're an avid researcher, aren't you?
Yes, that's right. Hi, by the way, Dee. Good to connect with you. And we're having that virtual cup of tea, as you say.
So Kathryn's World War II books include The Poseidon Adventure and Code Name Camille, Conspiracy of Lies, which, like my new book, Beyond Belief, is set in World War II Paris. So Kathryn, I'd love you to tell us about Conspiracy of Lies and maybe a bit about the research.
Thank you. Like you, I was drawn to France for quite a few years, really. And I'd been visiting the areas of Normandy a few times and Brittany. And I don't know, I was just drawn to that part of the world because of the battles and what went on there. So that was the start. Actually being in the area. But the other thing that I wanted to bring out when I started Conspiracy of Lies was it's about a woman who falls in love with a German. And I had a thing about these women that were falling for the enemy, and and what happened to them after the war, how many could not say anything, or they were killed often. But I thought quite often there would be a genuine love affair. But so that was the basis, that she fell for a German at the wrong time. But at the same time, she also is called to be a secret agent, and she's torn between two worlds. And
so she joins the resistance, does she?
No, she flees France.
Yes.
And she goes to London, and she's recruited by the Special Operations Executive, and she is flown back into she arrives back into France and work in Brittany as an undercover agent with the resistance.
Oh, okay. So that's where I guess there's a connection with my story too,
Yes,
because
that's right.
one of my main characters is actually based on a historical character that was in the resistance.
And like you as well, I do have quite a strong setting in Paris. Yes, I think that's what one reason that drew me to your book as well. The fact that you had done your research in Paris, and
it's such an amazing place to be, isn't it?
It is, and it was one of the worst places to be for the collaborators of all France. It was just terrible there.
Yeah. So I love finding out all about the historical aspects of France and of Paris itself. And I went through the sewers, and I went into the mosque, and I went into the synagogue, and there were just, all sorts of just amazing places. And Paris is just such a city alive with history, isn't it?
And it was interesting to see how Paris was during the Phony War, which is part of the starting point of Conspiracy of Lies. And so I was attracted to your book because we were in the same area and we were talking about the resistance. And I was interested to see how you did your work as well, because in other books have brought in the Muslims again and the Jews working together, and you've done the same thing. I haven't done it, but I've seen you've done the same. So I was interested to know how you researched that and how it came about.
Yeah, well, that was something. I was actually researching another book in Paris, and then I came across this story of Muslims at a mosque in Paris who had saved Jewish children during World War II. And so I actually applied for a grant through Creative Victoria, through Vic Arts, their Vic Arts funding program. And they gave me a grant to go to Paris to spend a month researching, which was just amazing. And so I was able to go to the actual mosque. I actually had a few difficulties with that because I don't speak Arabic or French. But I organised to do a tour through the Paris sewers, which is where my character escaped. And I think one of your characters escapes through the sewers, don't they, if I remember rightly?
In Code Name Camille.
Yeah.
She uses the escape routes through the sewers and down the Seine on the coal barges to take mainly the Jews that they were helping. So we
Yeah.
do have a similarity there in what we've been interested in.
Yeah, so it was so amazing to to see those sewers and to smell them and to think that that's how people escaped. And when I was doing the sewer tour, they gave me an interpreter, which was fantastic. And she actually happened to speak Arabic, and she was a Muslim, and she took me back to the mosque and helped me find the information that I needed.
So you were lucky there.
I was very lucky.
And where was the mosque?
It was the Grand Mosque of Paris, so it was across the road from the big gardens with the zoo in it.
And did you find that there were many Jews being hidden by Muslims?
It was hard to get an actual number, but my research suggests there was probably about 1,000 that went through the mosque. But from what I can gather, they helped them get false identities
Yeah.
and false papers so they could find their way out of Paris. So as far as the children, what they tended to do was pretend that they were children of the people living at the mosque.
Yeah, which would have been very difficult for them.
Yeah. And so that's basically what my character Reuben is. He arrives at the mosque, he's 11, and his parents have left him there because they've gone to find his sister Rosa, and
Yeah.
they're hoping to flee to Spain, which
Yeah.
is a lot safer at that time. And so he actually is left at the mosque, and he's taken on by the imam as part of his family. And so he has to pass himself off as a Muslim. And basically they have raids at the mosque, which they did during the war.
Yeah.
And if he's discovered that he's Jewish, then he'll be killed, and so will the people that are helping him.
Yeah, and the collaborators would have been working inside there as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But that's one thing I've found about doing research in my various books is that war brings out the best and the worst in us. And we often think of many religions as keeping to themselves, the people keeping to themselves. But there's so many stories of heroism and people helping the others. I mean, not all Germans were against the Jews. There are many Germans and Austrians that the Jews consider the righteous amongst nations.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of coming together. And with my books that I set in Greece and Turkey, although the Greeks and Turks had fought each other during World War II, the Turks definitely helped the Greeks, and particularly the Greek Jews. So
Yeah, and it's so relevant now to today even, isn't it? Because, I mean, even in our current situation, we're really seeing the best and the worst of people, aren't we?
Yes,
we're
we
seeing
are.
how people are really helping in their communities and other people, are really looking after themselves and nobody else. So it's really interesting to be able to draw those parallels. And I feel like even as far as fake news and propaganda, like during the war, there was so much propaganda, particularly in France, against the Jews. I mean, they even made fake movies and things to make the Jews look worse. And
Yes.
yet, we have that kind of thing today where it's really hard to work out what is actually real and what's fake.
I know. And another thing, when you're coming to do the research about World War II, you have to read, not only be there, I think, but you have to read so many different books from different viewpoints to get the balance of things.
Yeah, you do. And, there's so many museums in Paris, isn't there? And so many historic monuments and places to go and people to talk to. And I was actually really lucky here in Australia because the Holocaust Centre in Melbourne, they had some Holocaust survivors from Paris, and I was able to speak directly with them. And they actually read my manuscript for cultural sensitivity issues to make sure, and also for historical verification to make sure that the things that I had in my book were authentic.
And so, well, that's good. If you got them behind you.
Yeah, it was great. They were really helpful, and their librarian there was helpful too. And that was another thing I found, that you can set a story in a place, but there can be information that's available in so many other places around the world that can contribute to your story. You can somehow find the people that you need that can verify the things you need to be verified.
The amount of collaborators that were about the Franche-Comté Jura region could not have worked so well for the Germans if they had not have had so many collaborators.
Yeah, and during the Veldiv roundup in July 1942, the French police were the ones that were going and arresting the Jews.
Yeah.
And they arrested something like 11,000 Jews within a few days.
Yeah, yeah. Well, unlike Greece, with the Jews, because Greece definitely did not want to go with the pogroms against the Jews, and they made that clear to the Germans in the beginning. But even they couldn't do anything in the end, and the Jews felt quite safe until the last minute. Whereas I think right from the beginning in Vichy France, the Jews did not feel safe.
No, and that was because that had been a propaganda campaign that had been going, for years, really, for a couple of years before the Veldiv roundup.
Yeah, but we also have to remember that there was this anti-Jewish feeling in the whole of Europe at the time. So it was easy to hone in on people who believed in all this.
Absolutely. And I mean, my own family, my grandfather ended up in Dachau, and he was married in a synagogue, but he wasn't a practicing Jew, and he was arrested and put in Dachau as a preventative prisoner. So it was basically assumed that because he was Jewish, he would be about to commit a crime, and so they imprisoned him just in case. And so I actually have letters that he wrote to my father and to my father's mother from Dachau, and he was one of the lucky ones that got out in 1938.
He was very lucky. And what happened when he got out? Did he leave Austria?
Well, that's what happened. They left Austria after Kristallnacht and came to Australia. So some of those letters that he wrote in Dachau, which I'm going to be reading later on in my launch, some of those letters actually show a lot of hidden information about what their plans really were.
The plans of the Germans, you mean?
No, the plans for my father's and his family's plans to flee Austria.
Well, they were the lucky ones.
They were.
Because, as you said, he wasn't really a practicing Jew.
No.
A lot of Viennese Jews had classed themselves more first and foremost as Viennese, and had been not non-practicing for a while, and that they thought that would save them. So he was good. It was good for him that he recognized that in the end he wouldn't be saved either.
No, and there were some other members of the family that were able to flee, but unfortunately some of them didn't make it out, and they were some of the ones from Austria and also from Hungary.
Yeah.
So I think that's the thing. That's one of the reasons why I think writing books about World War II and that time in our history is so important, because these are lessons we can learn.
You don't know the truth of what's happening when you're in it.
No, that's true. But I think we're a little more savvy, and especially with things like social media, there's just more information out there that can be verified. I think we really need to open our eyes to all the information that's out there, and it's something that we need to do when we're researching as well for our books.
Yeah, we do. But where I am, when I've written my Greek and Turkish books, the same thing that happened there is happening in Syria and the Middle East.
Yeah.
So it's nothing different there. And also the divisiveness that's happened in the last few years is the same divisiveness that was happening before World War I and World War II.
That's true. Yeah.
So we just have to be. I always hope when I write something that I'm giving a warning, and people. I like primarily to tell a story. I'm telling a story when I write. But I want it to be something that people will really think about. I mean, I'm sure you feel the same with what you've just.
Yeah, I do. And you see that, like, my book hasn't been published. I mean, obviously it's about to be launched. It's being launched. But one of my Jewish sensitivity readers started reading it and said, "Oh, well, I don't believe this would happen. I don't believe that Muslims would do this." And we showed her some documented proof, and it completely changed her mind. She was just astounded, but she opened her mind to that this had actually happened. And she was 92 years old. So I feel like if somebody at 92 can change the way they think, then there's hope for everyone.
Yeah, but it's good that she thinks that now, but it just shows you that there's still a lot of work to be done. So I'm hoping this is a good ending with your book, Dee.
It is for readers age 9+, so it's an optimistic ending.
Right, that's good.
And I wanted it to really reflect the solidarity and the interfaith friendship between these Muslims and Jewish people.
Well, yeah.
So thank you for having a cup of tea with me, and hopefully one day we'll be able to do it in person.
And thank you for, it's been good to have this conversation together. And I wish you all the very best with your book launch. And I'm really looking forward to reading the book.